I mean, that's the future of the industry, isn't it? You know, it's
Exactly.
I think it's pretty terrible, really, with the way the industry works in nurturing new talent. I think there could be a lot of improvement there. I think too much of it is based on kind of the old guard, and you're getting these movies now. I know, that they're great directors and stuff, but you're getting these kind of legacy movies of these guys who are like 80, 80 plus. And obviously they're not going to be around for that much longer. So we do kind of need to nurture the youth within the industry as well and get those kind of stories told.
Today, filmmaker Elliott Hasler, most recently of Vindication Swim. Elliott, how are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I am fantastic. I am so thrilled you're here. If the tagline of the show is the future of filmmaking, and I don't think we could honestly keep that tagline without having you on here because it's just like your background is just so incredible. If you told somebody about it, they wouldn't believe it. How do you even like at the age of 10, like know what you're going to go into? It's just like I can. Have you made any sense of it?
Um, well, I mean, it's difficult to really say, really, because I mean, to be honest, it's just been kind of normal for me. So I don't know how.
Right.
I've never really analyzed
Exactly.
much depth. So yeah, I don't really know the answer to that, to be honest.
But so you started filmmaking, I think I read like around 10, and then you came out with your first feature. It's originally called Charlie's Letters and then renamed to World War II, The Long Road Home. At 16, you founded your own production company, Relsa Films.
Yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
it's my
Yep.
surname backwards.
And
That's where that came from.
like it. And made short films. Now I get that fact, like you can't analytically say, okay, here's my life. We don't know any other frame of reference there. But when you see like your peers, people your age struggling to make a short, has it just been boldness? Is that the one thing you can look back and say, you know what, I've taken major swings at an early age, and that the one piece of advice you might be able to give? Like, what brought you? Is there any sort of one thing that brought you into filmmaking?
I think there's an element to that, yeah, of sort of a boldness, really, because I've never come from anyone. None of my family are in the film industry or anything like that. It's all
Yeah.
it was all done kind of by myself, just through hard work and trial and error. There was no kind of the cushion of nepotism, which a lot of people use to get into the industry. I understand if you have that,
Right.
but I just didn't have that at my disposal. If I did, I would have used it. But
Right.
it was
Why not use? Like, why are people blaming people for using like what they have?
no, exactly. If it's going to make your life easier to get into something, then why not? But I certainly would have used it. It would have made my life a hell of a lot easier. But no, I think there was a certain sort of boldness, but I think also because I didn't have that nepotism, I didn't know the industry at all. I think there was also a big element of sort of naivety, really. If I'd
Yeah.
sat down and actually thought about things too deeply and sort of learned, the ins and outs of the industry, I probably wouldn't have wanted to enter it because you realize how hard it actually is. The amount of work you have to put in and all of that. So I think I never took that into account and kind of went ahead and did it without kind of any thought or regard really to the way the industry works. So yeah, I mean, it was just kind of, I say, a mix of boldness and a mix of naivety really that's like led me to where I am now.
And you were self-taught, you had no film school?
No, never studied film. No, just self-taught. Yeah, with
Okay.
trial and error, playing around with cameras and things.
And is that something that you think could happen now, like couldn't happen, say, 20 years ago? Because you did have YouTube, and I'm sure you used other things online that may not have existed, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also just the quality of cameras now. You can shoot 4K on an
Right.
iPhone, so I think having that at sort of your disposal now makes it a hell of a lot easier. Whereas back 20, 30, 40 years ago, you were shooting on like Super 8 or whatever. It was a lot more expensive. It was a lot harder to get access to. Whereas now you can just shoot tons and tons of footage from the phone in your pocket. So yeah, it's become a hell of a lot easier, which I think has definitely helped people like me break into the industry.
And there's just so many photos of you, like some of the behind the scenes photos of Vindication Swim, which I'm excited to talk with you about. Just like hilarious seeing people on the beach in period costumes. You're in shorts, like shooting. It's just it's phenomenal, Elliot. That just what you've been able to accomplish through boldness. You've also at 18 wrote an article on Raindance called "What It's Like to Be UK's Youngest Film Director," and I think you talked about a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast, like the whole you touch upon the whole Damien Chazelle, like just make a short type of thing, the advice. Looking back on that article, and I know you may not have done that, but looking back on that article, as you generally know it, what has changed for you in the 6 years since you wrote that? Would you make any changes from what you wrote when you were like 18 when you wrote that article?
No, not really. I think I stand by what I said in that article. I think it was pretty accurate to where I was at the time, and I think that kind of
Yeah,
ethos has continued and led me kind of through now. I think there has to be kind of it just get up and go attitude with this industry because no one's going to come around and give you a shot. You've got to prove yourself
right.
first, which I think is kind of the big thing for new filmmakers.
And one last age thing here. So, is there anything that you remember just as you got started, as you doing this, that you wish that you were like, man, that was shitty of that person to do? And then on the flip side of that, it's hard to consider you sort of like an established filmmaker at 24, but that's the truth of it. You've made 2 features, you've made a ton of shorts. Like, what are you actively, if a 16-year-old comes to you nowadays, what are you doing differently for them that you could think like, man, I wish somebody would have done that for me?
I think paying more thought to distribution and the stuff that comes after you've made the film. I wish someone has
Yeah.
sort of spoken about that because obviously when I made that film, I had no aim of having it distributed. It was just kind of, especially the first film, it was just kind of fun with messing around with friends and family. There was no professional actors in World War II: The Long Road Home. It was just an amateur production, and I never anticipated it was actually ever going to get released. So it would have been helpful to have kind of an eye towards the end goal of the film because someone told me later on that sort of making the film is 50% of the journey and then releasing it is the next 50%. And I think that's definitely
Yeah,
very true.
exactly.
So there's so much work to do with publicizing it and trying to get as many people to watch it as possible and getting it on the different platforms and things. It's incredibly challenging. And I think it would be helpful for someone to talk through that and help younger filmmakers move into that.
And was there any sort of event as you were coming up as like 16, 18, 20, where you remember, man, that you don't have to use names, but you remember like somebody did something really shit. Was anything like that happen?
Yeah, I had a load of money stolen from me by a rogue sales agent on that first film. Wasn't great, but that's something that I wish people had sort of.
That happens. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh
No,
yeah,
I feel like that happens all the time.
yeah, it does. It's really bad. I mean, it's an industry of kind of very little regulation. You get these cowboys out there who come along and sign you a in perpetuity agreement for licensing your film, and then they disappear and run off with the money. I mean, luckily I ended up getting the rights to it back, but it's a difficult one to navigate, especially as I was like 19, 20 when that happened. So it was it's just not something I anticipated was going to happen. You think these people are legit, and then it turns out afterwards that they're not.
Do you think that there are, especially in England with like BAFTA and others, do you think we're doing enough for that age group? I think they can tell great stories, and perhaps they're not getting enough advice on that end of things like distribution. Do you wish there were more programs like that for sort of that age cohort of filmmakers?
Yeah, definitely, because I mean that's the future of the industry, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
I think it's pretty terrible, really, with the way the industry works in nurturing new talent. I think there could be a lot of improvement there. I think too much of it is based on kind of the old guard, and you're getting these movies now. I know that they're great directors and stuff, but you're getting these kind of legacy movies of these guys who are like 80, 80 plus, and obviously they're not going to be around for that much longer. So we do kind of need to nurture the youth within the industry as well, and get those kind of stories told as well. There's not saying you can't have one without the other. There's room for both. So
Yeah.
I there needs to be a bit of a push to encouraging new talent into the industry and things that can help them get ahead because it's hard. It's tough to raise the funds and to go out and shoot and then get your film released and seen by people. So the industry does need to support new talent for sure.
Exactly. And I think about that all the time, whether it's filmmakers, politicians, things like climate change that may affect people in 30 years. If you're 80, you're not thinking about climate change. You're not, that doesn't concern you at all. Or filmmaker, anything that is going to happen in 2050, not your problem. So I think like
Exactly.
given that perspective that somebody brings who's 18, 20, who can think out for the next 30, 50 years, those topics, I mean, that's more relevant, not saying like you said, like, both stories are valid. It's not taking away from that person. You also need to hear stories that are going to be relevant for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just think the
Awesome.
industry is pretty terrible in nurturing new talent. I think there's a lot more that could be done.
That's a fantastic segue to Vindication Swim. It's almost sort of like you almost sort of like can take that personal of like whatever happened at the end of World War II. Like it's also your vindication of making another feature. And I'm sure you handled it differently in terms of the sales distribution and all that. So when somebody sits down in hopefully a theater to watch Vindication Swim, and I think it's been on the UK in theaters for the last few weeks, what would you want them to feel like when they come into the theater and watch the film?
I mean, this was a sort of a film made for seeing in theaters. It's got
Yeah,
these huge landscapes.
it's
You're
big.
out to sea. Exactly, yeah. It's as epic as we could make it at an indie level, really. So I think I mean, the main takeaway from the film is to kind of get that awe of being immerse yourself in the English Channel, so it feels as though you're swimming in there alongside, Mercedes Gleitze. But I think also the other takeaway I'd want people to have is to just be inspired by the film. It's an incredibly inspiring story. What Mercedes Gleitze did as a woman in 1927 to go out there and become the first British woman to swim the English Channel, and then this trailblazer of sort of women's sports and open water swimming. She really broke down all these barriers of misogyny, of racism as a German immigrant in the UK between the wars and things. So I think it really is kind of a testament to the fact that you can achieve your dreams if you just go out there and you have that grit and that determination. Then anything is possible. I think that's what the film speaks to.
And like we've talked about, is that sort of what attracted you to this story? Like the same ideals that you're undergoing, fighting through, a bunch of stuff to get your films made. You saw like her fighting through a bunch of things to make her dream come true. Did that sort of like relate to you, and you were able to write that story, sort of feeling like on some level you understood what she was trying to achieve?
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely a lot of kind of synergies in that sense that did, without a doubt, draw me to the story. And we were also born exactly a century apart. So Mercedes Gleitze was in 1900. I was born in 2000. So there was kind of a number of nice connectors, really. We also share the same hometown. We were both born in Brighton on the south coast of England. So yeah, there was a lot that drew me to it, really. Those elements, and also the challenge of filming out at sea, because we didn't shoot any of this in tanks or against a green screen. None of that. It was all 2 miles out in the English Channel, immersed in the water where Mercedes Gleitze would have actually swum. And Kirsten Callahan, who plays Mercedes, she did all her own swimming. There was not a single body double used on the production.
What made you decide to do it that way? Like, I feel like a lot of people in your position would have not done that and then, paid a ton of money on the sets, in say a courthouse or something like that. But you chose like the hardest filmmaking part. What drew you to that decision? Did you think like that would encourage people? Like, that's the true filmmaking part of it. Is that sort of what drew you to trying to do that part of it and emphasize that over what normally might be emphasized in an independent film?
Yeah, definitely. I think pushing yourself is really, what kind of draws me to it. Being out there filming at sea was, it was incredibly tough. Some days we'd go out, the weather would change, and we'd get maybe one or two shots in the can and have to come back in. And it was like multiple hours in order to get out there. We had to, load up the boat and get everything prepped. We had all the safety precautions, things like that. So if you did only get out there and get two shots, it was a complete waste of a day. And then you'd have to come back in, and
Right.
that was why it ended up taking 3 years to make the film, because we could only film in the summer months. Otherwise it's too cold to put Kirsten in the water or have the guys out there in the boat. So we had this sort of window from June through to September, really. And if we missed that, we had to wait a whole other year before we go back out again.
This is so incredible, Elliott. So I imagine just from your commitment to the veracity of the filmmaking, you would never consider using AI for part of this stuff. Like maybe I won't be talking to you in 5 years and be like, yeah, I made my AI film. Like that doesn't sound like something you're ready to pursue.
AI is interesting. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I'd want to make like a fully AI movie, and I don't know if people would really want to watch that. I think there's,
Right.
especially with the sort of films I like to make, I think having a sort of real, tangible aspect of the film is what makes it interesting to me. The fact that we could have, well, we didn't really have the budget, but if we'd had the budget, we could have mocked this up, in a studio somewhere, in the same way that they made like Life of Pi. It was on a sound stage and they had a big water tank and
Right.
things like
And
that.
the boat. Right.
But that costs a hell of a lot of money. You can't do that on an indie level. At least you can't do it well. So, I think
Right.
what sets this film apart is the fact that it is all real. Everything's genuine. You feel as though you're in the water because essentially the camera is in the water with Mercedes Gleitze. So it puts in that perspective about any kind of fakery. And I think audiences, today are so attuned to what's fake, and they can really tell when you're faking what's real. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of AI, I think essentially what it will be good as is sort of a big cost-cutting exercise, really, which will help independent film for sure. As I said, visual
Yeah.
effects are so expensive. So I think as a tool for sort of augmenting footage you've actually shot, then yeah, it could be great. But as it stands at the moment, I have no interest in making a fully AI movie.
And it brings up this scene in the film of a steamer approaching Mercedes. How was that shot, Elliot? Like, did you have the other boat like coming in? Like, what was that process? It was one of the most heart thumping parts of the film.
Well, that actually happened to Mercedes Gleitze when she's on the channel. So that was taken from sort of the writings from the era of what actually took place. But
Amazing,
it wasn't in the script because we didn't think we were going to have the budget to be able to do it, because finding
right?
a big old steamship from the 1920s that can come by and on an indie level is going to be almost
Come
impossible.
right at us,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
But what happened weirdly, which is quite serendipitous, really, was we were out there filming and the boat just appeared. It just turned up out of nowhere. It wasn't planned. We didn't even know it was coming. It was doing like a tour of the south of England, sailing along. So we ended up getting it in the film that way, purely by accident. It just happened to be passing, and then we kind of got it in the film. And it's the oldest, I think it's the oldest diesel engine ship still in operation worldwide.
Elliot, that is truly amazing. So it's screening in the UK in theaters now, and I think it's coming to the United States this fall. Do you have dates on like when that is going to be?
Yeah, so we open in New York on the 17th of October,
Okay,
and then it's in
okay,
select theaters, across the US and a couple in Canada after that.
okay. And do you have streaming plans? Like, is that something that you've already figured out, or is that something you're going to figure out after the theatrical run?
Yeah, so it's all in the motions, while the theatrical run's going on. So we released digitally
Okay,
on the 18th of November. So yeah, sort of a month later.
okay,
Where
okay,
exactly it is,
awesome.
I'm not sure, but it'll be everywhere. That's all I know so far.
And you figured out that you're confident in your distribution. I bring up that story because you mentioned what you're doing, and then one of the good friends of the podcast, Scott Monahan, ended up only getting his VHS rights for his film. So, like, you figured out you're happy with your current distribution setup.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I've learned a lot in terms of the world of distribution, in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So yeah, no, I'm confident this one's all buttoned down. That they're good guys, it's a great team, and I think it's going to be a really great release.
And have you taken on, has your production company, do you foresee one of the things over the next year or two, you bringing in like other filmmakers and then you helping produce their films? Is that something you're interested in doing? Because I feel like you have that expertise now to be able to share with people, your peers, in a way that they may not have.
Yeah, that is something I've started doing, only kind of on a very small scale at the moment, just because I have my own films to concentrate on. But yeah, there's another filmmaker.
Right.
There's another filmmaker that I've helped out. I've helped him get a good release for his movie, and that'll be coming out in October as well. So yeah, it's definitely something I'm interested in, because I wish there was that kind of expertise and knowledge available to myself when I was in their shoes. So if I can help nurture them and bring them along on this journey as well, then that's great to do, I think.
Not to imply that you have a ton of that you're doing a lot of lounging around and free timing, Elliot, because it's like releasing two features. I mean, like it's like when do you sleep type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, since we've finished filming, I have got a lot more sleep. But yeah, shooting out on the English Channel was a lengthy and tiring experience.
So there's so many great things in that Raindance article. I'll link it. Definitely encourage people to read it because you touch, like I said, on so many different things on independent film. And one of the sentences that stood out to me in the article, and I'll read it: an 8-minute film set in an apartment with two characters sitting out a zombie apocalypse is not only boring and an example of lazy, unimaginative filmmaking. It's pure white noise. What would you, and I love that sentence, what would you do in, say, a bottle film? Like, how do you make that 8-minute film engaging? And do you see that sort of like in your future, not making a white noise film, but taking that concept of just taking, not a huge set, but just like a small, bottle film type set and making it actually engaging for the audience? What would that look like, Elliot?
I think what you always want to strive for with a film is to take audience somewhere where they've never been before. So let them experience something they haven't seen before or heard before. I think when you're doing something that everyone else is trying to do, then it does become white noise. It blends into the background and it doesn't set you
Yeah.
apart from anybody else or set the work apart from anything else. So I think there should always be some sort of originality, a unique flair to a production, to a film. Otherwise, yeah, kind of what is the point really? Unless you're making it,
Right.
purely to kind of cash in and make some money, which is, it's not really the industry to be in if you want to make loads of money quickly. I think you need to have something that stands out and makes something that
Yeah.
speaks to you, and the film is original and it's got a unique angle to it, which I think, a lot of indie films do lack, because it is, I get why people make a film, with two characters in a room, because it's cheap, it's easy to raise the money, you've only got a couple of actors, so you've not got extras and big sets and things like that. And it is a lot easier, but then, you kind of ask yourself, well, what's the point if it's really easy? You're not pushing yourself. There's no,
Right.
there's nothing too interesting about it, So I think always aim big, and then you can always temper your expectations a bit. But if you start out too small, then I think you're selling yourself short.
That's such a great point, because I do think about that. I watch a lot of short films for this, and I think a lot about like what distinguishes one short film for another. Like, why do I like this particular film? Why do I not like
Mm.
this particular film? And I think it gets back to what you're saying. Like, for whatever reason, whether it's the cinematography, the acting, the writing, one element of that they took like a huge shot. Like, it's something that they did a twist that I haven't seen before, and it stays with me. Isn't that the challenge of short films, especially, is like it's so easy if you're watching them to just get like nothing from it, even if it's well shot, whatever, and you're left with, how do I make that where the viewer remembers my film?
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, really. Yeah, I think there always needs to be something different, something unique. I mean, even if you
Yeah.
don't succeed in it, I think it's still more admirable that you tried, and kind of
Yeah.
almost got there, than if you just play it too safe, and then it's just becomes a sort of bland sort of movie like everyone else is making. I think you should always strive for something, so some sort of element of originality and uniqueness to it. But I think my advice, sort of going back to the short film thing as well, would be. I would say aim for a feature. I think short
Yeah.
films, because a lot of filmmakers, they'll make a short film, and it's hard getting those out. There's so many of them, and you've got to get it into one of those big festivals, and there's a lot of pressure on it.
Yeah.
Really, they're harder to harder to get your short film seen. So I think my advice really would be, instead of making like a string of sort of six, seven short films, just pull all of that and make a feature out of it. Make a really low budget feature, instead of doing a short, because it is possible. And I think it just sets you in much better stead. And you can monetize it that way. You can get it released, you can get it seen, and then that income then helps you go on to make more films.
Do you think that's a particularly non-film school way of thinking? Like, I do think the film schools do set you on the pathway, the pipeline of, well, you need to submit your short to Sundance or Tribeca or wherever, and then you need to follow the steps. Whereas, like, somebody coming who didn't have to experience that in film school might just be able to, like, why am I doing this? Why am I wasting time like doing this with shorts, where like there is some sort of sense of like your peers will applaud you, like here's a laurel something, but it's not really moving you forward. Like is that there's some sense of that, of like you were not branded as part of the system, so you're able to think sort of like independently.
um yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I think film schools, they like to kind of have it in an organized sort of structure, as in you do this, you advance to this, and then you kind of move on, and it's all kind of, it's all kind of a laid out path. But I just
Right.
don't think the industry really works like that. I think what it's like, what, less than 1%, I think, of Sundance submissions actually get accepted into the festival, because there's
Yeah.
just so many these days. So I just don't see the point, even attempting that, really, because your chances are just so minimal. You might as well go out there and make a feature and get it released on a platform somewhere, and then promote it that way, and people are going to, people can watch it then. Because, to be honest, the films that show at Sundance, especially with short films, it's hard to ever find them once they've been at a festival. They kind of disappear, and they're not on, say, Netflix or streaming platforms in the way that a feature is. So
Right.
I think, visibility wise, a feature sets you in better stead.
I love it, Elliot. I really hope that you're able to talk with people nowadays and give them that advice. So, as the youngest filmmaker, I don't know if there's a crown pass. Like there's some 17-year-old out there who's just like, well, I'm actually now the youngest filmmaker. But at, speaking broadly, the youngest filmmaker in the UK, people would think that you have huge on TikTok, huge on YouTube. I don't know if that's the case. Do you think that like those metrics will be the ones that are used with Generation Z, Generation Alpha, as like, okay, well, let's check out Elliott's TikTok account, YouTube. Do you feel like that's sort of a standard that people, your peers, need to be hitting? Or do you sort of like, I don't care about all that. I'll be judged by my work?
Yeah, no, I mean that's definitely. I don't care about that. I don't have TikTok, so no one's going to find me on there. But I think if you do have that and you have got a big following, then it's only going to help you because
Right.
like, you see things about actors now, they get hired because of their social followings and things like that, which
Exactly.
I'm in kind of two minds about that. I mean, one, it's great for promotion, but I think at the end of the day, someone should be hired on on the merit of their talent as opposed to the amount of followers they have, really. So
Yeah, exactly.
but, obviously it is helpful for promotion, generating awareness for the film. But yeah, personally, no, I'm not. I'm not interested in TikTok or any of that kind of stuff. I think I'd rather the work spoke for itself as opposed to me telling people what to think about it on TikTok.
Is there something uniquely UK about this? Like, do you feel like the standards of being a filmmaker in England are a little bit different than the United States, where you don't necessarily have to do as much of that? Or do you feel like there's really no difference? It's sort of like a global phenomenon in terms of however talent is found, like the standards are the same.
I think in the UK it's more sort of snooty. There's more of a club within the film industry, I would say, which
Yeah.
is harder to break into, from my perspective at least. Whereas, I know filmmakers out in the US and things like that, and I'm not saying it's easier necessarily, but I think
Yeah.
the industry, from me looking in, appears to be more welcoming and more nurturing of new talent. I don't know if that is necessarily the case, just because I haven't experienced it, but that's certainly what it looks like
Right.
to an outsider. Whereas in the UK, having been in that, it is very, very difficult to break in. I think there's more of a sort of rigid establishment, which I don't know if that's just kind of more of the sort of a Britishness kind of trait,
Right.
in a sense. Whereas in the US, you kind of are more sort of open to newer ideas and new people and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not sure. It looks as though it is more welcoming to an outsider looking in.
Filmmaker Ali Cook, who I had in the podcast, said the exact same thing. That there is sort of like a more snooty level in the UK. Do you think that may have something to do with like the sort of theater background, where sort of you're expected to go into theater, live performance, that kind of thing, sort of like earn your reputation, whereas say in the United States or other places, you can build it in other ways, like TikTok, YouTube, whatever. It's more democratic, say, in terms of what the expectations are for a filmmaker.
I think it just sort of ties into the culture of the different kind of
Yeah.
cultures in both of our countries. Really, I think in the US there is
Yeah.
this sort of, people like an underdog story of someone who kind of came from nothing and worked their way up. Kind of that
Right.
rags to riches American dream kind of story. Whereas in the UK, it's not. I don't think that's as tied into our culture, as such. I think it is more of a sort of more of an establishment, which is harder to break into. I'm not, again, I'm not trying to say it's easy in the US, but I think the
Right.
culture,
No, exactly.
yeah.
That's brilliant, Elliot. So, as much as you can share, what are you working on next? You obviously Vindication Swim coming out in theaters now in the UK, coming out in United States and digitally later on this year. Are there any other projects that you're working on that you can talk about?
Yeah, so there's a couple. I can't say too much about them, but there's so one's like a true crime thriller. It's a lot darker than Vindication
Ooh,
Swim, kind of a murder mystery sort of thing, which is a very cool project. We've got a great script, which I co-wrote with Kirsten Callahan, actually, who plays Mercedes in Vindication Swim. So we've written this film, which we're sort of pitching out at the moment. We're getting there slowly but surely with raising the funds for that one, and yeah, hopefully we'll be filming that in about a year. So there's that one, and there's another film which is sort of a First World War movie as well, which is it's fantastic, a
okay.
sort of unheard true story. So yeah, that one's also very exciting. Hopefully, we'll be shooting that one in the not so distant future as well.
You love shooting big, Elliot. I haven't heard you be like, well, I'm shooting an office film. Like, you're like World War epic. It's just incredible.
I mean, it'll be
Uh,
pretty fun. I think those period movies, when you come on set, in Vindicated Swim, it was like there's some of the street scenes and stuff. You walk on set, there's like a 1920s car, there's all these people in costumes, a horse and cart, and you're like, this is so cool. I mean, it's like I've walked back into the 1920s. It's pretty fun to just stand there on set. As you said earlier, I'm just in a pair of shorts, stood there trying to film it, and it is just a very surreal, very interesting experience.
do you feel like, and maybe you can only answer this after you've raised the money, but if I feel like one of the things that filmmakers hear when they're trying to raise money for a feature is, well, you haven't done a feature. You don't have that issue. Like you can be like, yeah, I've done two. Do you feel like the process has become easier for, not that to say that it's easy, but it's easier for you because you have that track record now?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it certainly opened up, way more doors that I previously would not have been able to get into before Vindication Swim. So yeah, I mean, it hasn't made it easy, but it certainly made it easier for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Love it. This has been amazing, Elliott. So, Indie Film Podcast, love hyping other people's projects. I'm sure as you've gone along, you've seen your friends, colleagues, peers, struggle in the system. It's extremely hard to get things made. Is there a film or filmmaker out there that you wish more people knew about?
Um, that's a good question. I have not been particularly, I shouldn't have been as involved as I should have been in watching indie films recently, just
Interesting.
because I've been too busy. I should watch some more. But the most recent indie film I watched was it's called Witchfinder General. It's old. It's from like the early '60s. It was made by a guy called Michael
Love
Reed,
it.
who was he's about the same age as me actually. He sadly died at 25, so his career was cut short. But I would recommend that as
Well,
an
I hope
independent
that
film.
doesn't hope that doesn't happen, Elliott.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully not. But yeah, I would recommend indie filmmakers watch it because it's a great example of what can be done on a very limited budget, and he does achieve a lot with that film, and I thought it was a very good movie. So yeah, Witchfinder General, I'd recommend to indie filmmakers.
I'm so inspired by your story. I think what you're doing is so important for filmmakers to take that big leap. I think it's more comfortable to make a short, be like, I know that's within my abilities. And, people out there think like, oh, I can't do a feature. You're showing people that, even at an early age, you can do a feature. You can not only do a feature, but you can do a period piece feature. You can go out an English channel. Like you shouldn't limit yourself to whatever limitations that other people are trying to put on you. I mean, nowadays you can get the equipment, you can, as long as you're brave enough to be swimming in the English Channel in the summer, you can go out and do what you want. And I think that should be that's so inspiring for people to be able to hear your story and that you've been successful. So I'm cheering for your success. This has been so fantastic talking with you about it. Elliott Hasler, the film is Vindication Swim, now in theaters in the UK, coming to the United States this fall. Check it out. Elliott, I'll hope, as your career goes on, you'll come back on the podcast for future films. You're an inspiration. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks for your kind words and having me on. It's been great to talk.